Functions have the purpose of modularizing and isolating a bit of code from the rest of the program. Now, one of the most powerful ways in which they do that is through the concept of a function scope. Now, by scope of a variable, we mean the area of your program in which it is defined and it can be accessed. Functions define a scope, meaning that variables that are created within a function are only accessible within that function. This is very useful because, as you can imagine, in a long program you would have a lot of variable names, and after a while it's difficult to keep track of all of them, and if you have a function arbitrarily modifying one of them, this can be very hard to debug. So let's look at this function in particular. You see it takes one parameter x, and then it computes twice the value of x and stores it in a variable y, and then it returns that variable. Now, if you call the function and print result, clearly what you get is that value of that variable y, and y, in this case, if we call with the argument 3, would be equal to 6. But as we can see, when we try to access y directly, that's no longer defined. So we get an error, a name error, saying name y is not defined. But this is only half of the story. The most interesting bit is what happens if we do have in the main program a variable called y. That would in principle conflict with the one we define within the function. So let's try to uncomment this line so that we have a y equal 1 as a variable within your program outside any function that's called the global variable. So we have a global variable y equal 1, and then we call test 3, so which means that the y that's defined within the function becomes 6. And so you'll be surprised by the output of this program. As you see, test 3 prints a value of 6, which means that this y was 6. But when we do print y, we now don't get an error any longer. We get the value of 1, which was the value of this variable. And that is because, effectively, this y is its own variable. It overrides the global variable, which is no longer accessible within the function. And when the function returns, this variable disappears, ceases to be, and we are left with a global variable untouched. So this is a very powerful mechanism for preventing code within the function from having unintended side effects on the code outside the function.